Okay, beautiful. All right, folks. Good tovach, Shavua Tov, and welcome to another week of learning from the Parsha. And hopefully we're going to learn something new and intriguing as we try every week. Whoever can put on their camera, that'd be amazing. And whoever can't, we understand. Not a problem. We understand. So this week is a double portion. Achrei and Kedoshim. The second parsha deals with a lot of very intriguing mitzvahs, full of commandments. Commandments about relationships, commandments, what it means to become, as the word Kedoshim means holy, sanctified, transcending the human condition, mitzvahs. Achrei is a large part about Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur. Now, we might feel that we're very distant from Yom Kippur right now. Right? Doesn't feel Yom Kippur is on the horizon, right? So why would we learn about Yom Kippur now? Anybody? Besides the fact, of course, it's in the Parsha.
Holy.
Huh? Oh,
Well,
so it ties in with holiness, right? With the following Parsha of holiness, the holiest day. Very good. Right? What other reason would we be learning about Yom Kippur now? Again, of course, it's the Parsha, and because it's the Parsha, Dayenu, that's sufficient. But what is the inner dimension here, and why, at this time of year, spring, Reggie is waiting to plant some tomatoes. He wants to have his fresh organic tomatoes. And we want to be outside in the nice warm weather. No one's thinking Yom Kippur. So then what is the inner meaning over here of the fact that this week's Parsha speaks about Yom Kippur? Is, of course, Yom Kippur is not a holiday that is, is secluded or is relegated to just one time of the year. It's really something that is a lesson and has a value throughout the year. So there's lessons from Yom Kippur that we need to learn today, since it is this week's Torah portion. So my question is, first of all, let me just welcome some of the people that just came in. Dennis, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much.
Liba and Davida, thank you for joining. And I think, and Liana, thank you for joining. And everybody else I already welcomed previously. So, who wants to share with me, when you think Yom Kippur, right, what do you associate that day with? Anybody?
asking God and others to forgive our sins. God can forgive us, but we have to get forgiven. And so the last Torah portion, they talked about after the women gave birth to going to the mikveh and going to to make sacrifices for those sins.
Okay, very good. So we're thinking about forgiveness from another person that we may have heard, forgiveness from God. So what's the day associated with? Lots of prayers and lots of forgiveness, right? The day is a day full of prayer, of course, right? It's a day that we're wearing our talis the whole day. Some people have the custom, they wear a kittel, the white garment, showing on the purity and the holiness of the day, and so on. However, if we look in the Torah portion, and if we would know what went on during the times of the Holy Temple, we'd actually get a different view of things. What kind of view would we get? Anybody? What would be the major predominant feature of Yom Kippur if you're looking at it from the times of the Holy Temple, which the Torah portion is making reference to? What would be the focus? Anybody?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice is very good, but sacrifices you have every day. So what's unique about Yom Kippur? You're not wrong, but what would be unique? The high priest, the Kohen Gadol, and his unique sacrifices that he does in the Holy of Holies, which is only done that one time of the year by the holiest person in the holiest place in the holiest time. So yes, you'd be fasting on Yom Kippur in the times of the Holy Temple, but probably that was not such a great focus. My speech on Yom Kippur is a great focus, at least for me. I'm thinking about it. And maybe others might be also. Or the cantors Avinu Malkeinu, the chazan is like a major focus, and the singing with the chazan together. Sometimes the Holy Temple. There wasn't any of that. It was about the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, his avodah, his special unique service, which embodies us coming close to God. Let's take a look. Let us take a look. All right. Is that large enough? Can you see? There we go. For on this day, from the Parsha, he shall effect atonement for you to cleanse you before God. You shall be cleansed from all your sins. It is the Shabbos of rest for you, and you shall afflict yourself, that's how we know that you fast from the affliction. And it's not just affliction. You don't wear leather shoes, which is a sign of affliction. You don't anoint yourself. In other words, perfume yourself, bathe yourself. And you don't have any intimate relations, husband and wife. Eating and drinking, of course. So those are the 5 things from that idea of affliction. It is an eternal statute. And the Kohen who is anointed, meaning the high priest, or who is invested to serve in his father's stead, shall effect this atonement. And he shall don the linen garments, the holy garments. And he shall effect atonement upon the Holy of Holies. And he shall effect atonement upon the tent of the meeting, upon the altar. And he shall effect the atonement of the Kohanim and upon all of the people of the congregation. All this shall be an eternal statute for you to effect atonement upon the children of Israel for all their sins, once each year, as he did as the Lord had commanded Moshe. So very clear, the main focus. Now, people still had to do their part, of course, but there was the Kohen Gadol, the holiest person. This is akin to the idea of going to the Oyel of the Rebbe and asking the Rebbe, when we need some assistance on high, that be there for us, to assist us, to ask from God. So likewise, we have on the holiest day, the holiest person in the holiest place, in the Holy of Holies, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, there on our behalf. Now, of course, there's prayers that everybody says, and everybody's engaged, but we need that little extra effort from that little extra greater person than us, or much greater person than us, the Kohen Gadol. Now, the truth be said, we remember this in Yom Kippur. If you remember in Musaf Amida, and the additional prayer near the end, and the congregation kind of thins out at that point. A lot of people are maybe go home and come back later for Ne'ilah or for whatever. But we do have parts in the prayer service that is a remembrance um, of this part of the divine service in the times of the Holy Temple. And here we have this we have in the Machzor, and this is what he said: "O God, your people, the house of Israel, have sinned, have committed iniquity, and have transgressed before you. I beseech you, and for the sake of the ineffable name, grant atonement for sins, iniquities, and transgressions that your people, the house of Israel, have sinned, committed, and transgressed before you, as it is written in the Torah of Moshe, your servant, in your glorious name. For on this day atonement shall be made for you to purify for all the sins before the Lord." And, you know, this is one of the things, and there is further in the Machzor with a very haunting melody that is sung several times at this point in the Avodah. And onlookers in the times of the Holy Temple, seeing the Kohen, the high priest, that he would say the following. And when the priests and the people standing in the temple court heard the glorious and awesome name fully pronounced issuing from the mouth of the high priest in holiness and purity, they would bend their knees and bow and fall to their faces and exclaim, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa Li'olam Vayed. And that's when we bow down, if you recall, in that part of the service several times, right? The people were so awed, right? We were speaking now in Tanya about love and awe. So the only example that I have of really a sense of awe is standing for a very holy and righteous individual like the Rebbe. So back in the Holy Temple, people experience that especially on Yom Kippur, with the high priest. He would say the name of God the way it's written. Until, as we learned recently, in the times of the Second Temple, after Shimon HaTzadik had passed away, and then he was in the second Mishnah of the Pirkei Avos, that after his passing, that he was the high priest for 40 years. The high priests weren't as lofty and righteous as the previous ones, and they wouldn't say God's name the way it is written, but the way we say now, like Adai Shem, right? Can you imagine hearing from the mouth of the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, whew, that brought you to tshuva. That brought you to being connected to God Almighty. And then finally, I mean, there's many different things, but finally, and this is one of my favorites, we sing a Chabad melody when the Kohen Gadol would come out of the Holy of Holies. The radiance, the glory, the I don't know, just when I sing it, I just sense it. I picture what it must have been like to be there with the throngs of people in the Holy Temple and having this awesome experience. Now the Kohen Gadol is coming out of the Holy of Holies, and we sing. We would sing to the melody, and so how radiant, you see there on the screen, was the high priest as he came out of the Holy of Holies in peace. What do you mean in peace? He came out alive. Because if he wasn't really a holy person and didn't have holy thoughts continuously in his divine service, year after year, a Kohen Gadol would die in the Holy of Holies. But he came out in peace. Like the splendid canopy spread over the vaults of heaven, as was the appearance of the priest. And this is Kemara Kohen. La 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 la. And we're singing in shul, and we're this is like actually a difficult part of the fast, because it's like mid-afternoon, later in the afternoon. I have more strength than I do mid-afternoon. I have more strength later on, because the energy of the day becomes even stronger because you're coming to Mincha and Neila and so on. But at that point, I'm just uplifted singing that melody with everybody, whoever's left in shul. And it's something very beautiful. Like the lightning that flashes from the brilliance of angels was the appearance of the Kohen. Like celestial blue twined in the four fringes of tzitzis was the appearance of the priest. like the Arabians' appearance of the rainbow in the midst of the cloud was the appearance of the priest, and so on. Anyway, oh boy, that was a Yom Kippur I just went through. I felt I was just there. So we could now at least appreciate what it means a Kohen Gadol on that day has to be physically, mentally, emotionally, and of course, spiritually at his greatest peak. And the Mishnah actually describes about the Kohen Gadol and what the preparation that is necessary for him to engage in, preparing for this holiest of days. The Mishnah in the tractate Yuma tells us 7 days before Yom Kippur, the high priest is removed from his home to the chamber of the anointed ones. Another priest is designated to stand in the place in the event that something happens to disqualify him from being able to perform the service. Now, what could disqualify him? Anybody? Not all at once. What could disqualify him?
Marital relations.
Marital relations. Okay. Actually, more specific. Okay, good point. We'll get there in a moment. But specifically, what could it would be if he becomes impure? If he becomes if he accidentally, right, unwittingly comes in contact with a corpse, he's impure. So 7 days is part of the process of the cleansing. So if he accidentally, in the midst of those 7 days comes in contact, right, he is in a closed place where there's a corpse, comes in contact, he becomes impure. And so on and so forth. So we want to make sure that he has complete purity, because otherwise there has to be a designate, and there is someone who is there as a designate as a result. Now, the Mishnah continues and says something very interesting. Rav Yehuda said that another wife is designated for the high priest in case the current wife should die. As it says, and he shall make atonement for himself and for his household. The term household refers to his wife. Now, truth be said, that that's his opinion. That's an opinion of a singular individual. The Chachamim, the majority of rabbis, say no, that they don't have another wife in waiting, because just in case she passes away. But where's this coming from? Like, why would that be? So if we look in this week's Torah portion, we have an interesting verse that we just alluded to. That says, and no man shall be in the tent of meeting when he comes to effect atonement in the holy until he comes out. Meaning the Kohen Gadol is there alone in the divine service, right? Bringing atonement for the entire Jewish people. And he shall effect atonement for himself first. Can't forget yourself. For his household and for all of the congregation of Israel. What does it mean, household? So the simple meaning would mean, obviously, his family, right? Don't forget yourself first. You have a responsibility for yourself, so you need to seek atonement. But that's not sufficient. You need to take care of your entire family, correct? And then, of course, the entire Jewish people. If you're cleansed, you bring cleansing and atonement for your family, now you can bring it for the entire Jewish people. After all, he is representing them as the holiest person on the holiest day in the holiest place, right? But interesting, the word Beisai, the Talmud, the sages tell us that's not what it means. It doesn't mean family. Beisai, zu ishta, means his wife. It means his wife. It means not only he's bringing atonement for himself, but his wife, right? And of course, for the entire Jewish people. So what do we learn from this? What does the Talmud tell, the sages in the Talmud learn out from this verse? Remember, in every written word, we need the elaboration of the oral tradition of the sages who give us the understanding of what its elongated in meaning is Kohen Gadol has to be married. Maimonides brings us in the halachic ruling. Maimonides says a sacrificial service for all of these, especially Yom Kippur offerings, on this day may be performed only by the high priest, a Kohen Gadol. Similarly, all of the other services performed on this day that are not unique to Yom Kippur, such as the offerings and daily incense offering and the kindling of the menorahs, lamps, and are all performed by a married high priest, as the verse states. And he shall atone for himself and his household. His household refers to his wife. It refers to his wife. Does anybody have any questions before I ask mine? Or I don't know if they're mine, they're Rebbe's. As we're learning a Sikha from the Rebbe, based on the Rebbe Sikha. Anybody have a question?
Has that actually, is there any midrash or any other readings where that actually happened, where the priest's wife died and he actually had to, or is that just something we read about in theory?
So
what would happen?
As we know in halacha has to deal with all eventualities or all possibilities, right? It doesn't have to be something that has to be in fact. So not that I know of. I never heard of such a thing. And halacha is not according to Rabbi Yehuda that there's another designate wife just in case, right? No, the halacha isn't that there isn't anybody that's. But the bottom line of this is not so much that there's another one in the wings that might be, no, not at all. The important message over here is that the Torah, when it says Beisai, his home, means his wife. That's the important thing. So, meaning that he needs to be married. So the obvious question is, why? Why does he need to be married? He doesn't need to be married any other day of the year. Why does he need to be married here? In other words, no other place in the Torah do we find that a person needs to be married in order to perform any divine service, right? So why does he need to be married here in order to perform the Yom Kippur service is the first question. Second question, unless someone has one, I'll ask it. Anybody? No? Okay. The second question is, what do the sages say the word Beisai means? Ishtai, his wife, right? I just explained that the oral tradition of the sages, that the sages elaborate, is like the taking the short, the shorthand of the written law, and they're elongating it and giving us so to speak, between the lines, understanding what is meant by words and verses. But here, all the sages did was substitute one word for another. Instead of the word his house, they substitute his wife. Well, if that's the case, then why didn't the Torah just say his wife? Sages didn't seemingly add anything to this. Yes, they are explaining what it means. We wouldn't have thought house meant his wife. We would have thought it meant his family. Sages say no, it means his wife. Okay, so Torah, God, why don't you just say that? It would have been simpler. Is that clear?
I wouldn't say it's clear to me. I'm just wondering, just as you elaborated, why not just keep it simple? Why not just simply say wife?
That's the question I just asked.
Yeah, I know, but it's like.
Oh, so we need an answer. Well,
yeah.
We're only asking the question now. Answers will come.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, answers we're going to be patient for.
Mm-hmm.
First we want to get our questions up, then we'll get our answers. But yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Just be, instead of being cryptic about it, be very explicit.
To the point, precisely.
To the point, exactly, right. Okay. So now in the fact that the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, has to be married, there's two ways to look at it. Is it because, and you have to put on your Talmudic caps for this one because, there's a little nuance over here. Is it because the unique divine service on this day has to be done by someone that is married, i.e. the high priest, right? Because there's a unique divine service that needs to be done on this day that's not on other days, in a unique place called the Holy of Holies, in the unique time of Yom Kippur. And therefore, because of this unique service, that's why it has to be the Kohen Gadol has to be married. Or is it that this is about the Kohen Gadol himself, that the day requires, not that the service requires, but the day requires that he be a married person? That's Talmud, no answers, not an answer yet, because we got to get into the meat of stuff before we can get the answer. But I want to make sure that the question is that the nuance splitting of hair is over here. We're splitting a hair over here, right? I'm losing some hair over here, so it might be a little more difficult sometimes to appreciate the splitting of hair. But I hope we appreciate that. Is that clear? Is that Mr. or Mrs. iPad? Welcome. Thank you for joining. Oh, okay. Richard. Okay. Now we go. Beautiful. Okay. We're good? All right. Wonderful.
So the nuance is, does the day require him to be married? Or what was the first part?
Is the uniqueness of the service. Because of the uniqueness of the service on this day, right? Does that require him to be married? Or is the day require that it's a married man that is involved in this day? The new, right?
Okay.
Right. Is it about the job or is it about the person? That's really it. There's a job on this day that's special. Is it the job requirement or is it the personhood requirement? Now, in the end, it's a flip side of the same idea, but it is a different side of the coin, right? In the end, the person's doing the job's being done by a person, right? I'm really making you think. And to really, but right, you can't get away from a person doing the job and the job being done by the person. But there's two different ways to look at it. Is it about the virtue of the person or is it the virtue of the job that's done by a person? Okay. I shouldn't have brought this up, I think. I think I'm throwing you for a loop. Who's got thumbs up on that? And if not, that's okay. We're going to continue because even if you don't get this point, that's okay. If it's not clear. Okay. So we got to back up for a moment before we're going to come back to this. And we need to appreciate the following. Or rather have perspective on the following. How do we view marriage? How do we view family? How do we view the woman in marriage? How does the man view, or how's a woman viewed in marriage? Okay. Is that clear? The issues that we need to, there's different ways you could view the value of marriage, the purpose of marriage, right? Family. and a wife in marriage. Okay. Now, let's give some contrast. Some of you probably heard joke number 42. Yeah? I guess not, because no one's laughing. So you probably did not hear this joke. So 1,000 years ago, the monks in the monastery were realizing, we want to make sure that our tradition is, the holy tradition. And they sent a new, young, aspiring, inspired monk to go back into the vaults and to find some of the original manuscripts from way back. And, bring them out and we'll study and make sure that, we're carrying out the tradition the way it should be. And a day passes, he doesn't come back. 2 days, he hasn't come back. So the other monks are concerned. So a few of them go into the, deep down into the vaults to try to find him. And they finally find him. And he's crying. He's lamenting. I don't think he thought he was the high priest, but but he's crying. Says, what are you crying? What's the problem? I found the original manuscripts. I found it. Says, well, so they're full of joy. So why are you crying? You should be happy. We have the original manuscripts. Says, because look, it doesn't say celibate, it says celebrate. Now you know that's joke number 42. Okay. Next time I just have to say 42. You're gonna be so I don't need to go any further. All other religions look at marriage, look at intimacy between husband and wife, either as a necessary evil for propagation of the species, or at best, a human weakness. That if you're truly strong, then you're not celebrating, you're celibate. Now, this can't be more than anything, the antithesis of anything that's Jewish. Because we value family, marriage, as not just a weakness, not just something for the masses, not just for, propagating the, the species. But indeed, it's actually the very first mitzvah in the Torah, right? And I'm sure we're all familiar with. As the verse says in Bereshit, and God created man in his image, in the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And God blessed him, and God said, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the sky, and over the beasts that tread upon the earth. In Isaiah, goes even a step further and tells us that the ultimate purpose of creation, for so said God, the creator of heaven. Who is God, who formed the earth and made it? He established it. He did not create it for waste. He formed it to be inhabited. I am God, and there is no other. The Rebbe speaks passionately about family life. Bearing children is a mitzvah in the Torah. And it's not just any mitzvah. It is the very first mitzvah in the Torah. sequence in Torah is significant. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and conquer it is quite literal. Namely, that we should have children, many children, and raise them in the manner that they can go out and conquer the world. Jewish ethical works speak of this idea. On the verse, and you shall light the candles, stated regarding the menorah. They speak of the notion that every Jew is considered a candle. A candle is not meant to lie in a box unused. Rather, the whole point is to place it in a candelabra and to kindle it together with the rest of the Jewish people. From the moment he or she is born, every Jewish child is a candle. The goal is to raise them to be an illuminating candle, so much so that they can eventually fill the earth and conquer it. Right? So maybe now we can have a little more of an understanding that the importance of what it means, Beisai, his house, and how the relationship of what it means, his wife. Although a person doesn't want to be alone, and God says it's not good that I created man alone, therefore he creates Ezer Kenegdai, a helpmate, a helpmate, and that was Chava, Eve, right? So there is value in the relationship between husband and wife, but ultimate purpose is creating a home. As the woman is the one who transforms, the old saying, a house into a home. A house has 4 walls, different colors, or one color, has many physical things about it, but to create into a warm, loving, nurturing environment, that's a home, not a house. So in this sense, the Torah is telling us when it says Beisai, his home, referring to his wife, this is the ultimate in what is meant to be created between the two together. Now, this again doesn't suggest that there isn't a relationship between husband and wife that is not about having family. As a matter of fact, the law is that when a man marries a wife for the first year, he's exempt of any military engagement because he has the mitzvah to bring joy and happiness to his wife for the first year of their marriage. And they have no children in the first year. I mean, maybe at the end of the first year, with God's blessing, yes. But for the most part of that first year, they're not having a family. So there is indeed value in the relationship itself. No doubt about that. And even to go a step further, in the relationship between husband and wife, and I've spoken about this recently a few times, Maimonides tells us something very interesting. Our sages, this is from Maimonides in Mishnah Torah, our sages commanded that a man honor his wife more than his own person and love her as he loves his own person. If he has financial resources, he should offer her benefits in accordance with his resources. He should not cast superfluous measure of fear over her. He should talk with her gently, being neither sad nor angry. You notice something very interesting here. Anybody? I've mentioned this before. Who remembers from any of the Tanya classes? What did Rambam say? He didn't mention love first. He mentioned respect first. Respect comes before love. How come? Anybody? All you need is love. That's what Paul McCartney says. He's wrong. Respect comes before love. How come? Anybody? Hey, anybody married
It's
here?
earned.
You better answer this if you're married. Uva, go ahead.
It's earned over, over time and service to each other, trust, all these other things.
Did the Rambam say here you had to earn respect? Not at all. He didn't say that.
No, love is earned from
Love is earned. You're saying love.
being.
Okay, the Rambam didn't say that. It may come.
No, that's my guess.
Okay, no, I understand what you're saying. I don't know if you meant the word earned. Can I put a different word that I think maybe it evolves, it develops, it comes, right? Yeah. In other words, it doesn't, it has to evolve and come into that. Absolutely correct. So that is a reason why it comes second, a reason. But give me a reason why respect comes first, not because love is something that we evolve into. First of all, do we have to evolve into respect?
Perhaps respect is a choice, is an act of the will. I
Absolutely.
choose to respect you.
Right. Very good. Excellent.
As my
But is
wife.
that something we evolve into? Absolutely not.
No.
Right. Absolutely not. Like as you said, Dennis, it is something we choose. And I can choose right now to respect you, period. It's not something I have to evolve into. Respect means I make space for you. I appreciate you for who you are, period. I don't, respect doesn't mean I have to agree everything with that you believe in or you do or whatever. But what it means is I'm making space for who you are. That's respect. And that, as you said, that is very well, something we can make a choice. And that choice is something we always have to make sure we respect, as he says over here, a husband respects his wife, period. What does that mean? It means to say that you value the person for who they are. You're respecting that. You're making space for that. Eventually, maybe you'll even love that, right? You evolve into that. You become, that evolves. But the respect is something that comes first and foremost. In other words, in the relationship, there's something about the person for who they are, period. Right? And we need to appreciate that person or respect them at least. And in such a manner, more than we respect ourselves. More than I respect myself for myself, I respect my wife. That's what I need to do. That itself is a task and very important. So what does this mean? It means there's a value to the relationship for the relationship itself. You respect that person as a person. Yet, the ultimate in this relationship is that you are building something together. You're building something that transcends the two of you. That's called a family. Which ultimately will take transcendence from father and mother to raise a family. And that's why today, I was very disturbed. A few weeks ago, I was I saw about on Clubhouse, one of the mediums that I'm using, for the Tanya class. Maybe I should have had them on for today for this. Probably would have been good. And it was a discussion about young adults. I know a lot of them, but choosing not to have a family. Married, yes. You know, you want to have someone in your life. You don't want to be alone. Whether married, literally married, or you know, whatever. You know, at least being together, common law, whatever. You know, but you don't want to be alone. Why don't you want to be alone? Because you don't want to be alone. Because it's all about you, right? You don't want to be alone, and which is fine. We get that. That's natural. But there's something more. Basically, wife being not merely that I am not just alone, but that I am building a home with my wife. And that's the ultimate, transcending not only, you know, transcending the human condition of not wanting to be alone, but that I want to build something greater than self. A family is the ultimate. So interesting. When our kids go out on a shidduch, right, which a shidduch means an arranged date. In other words, it's not an arranged marriage. We don't arrange marriages, we arrange dates. Anybody that either the parents feel are not appropriate for the child, or the child feels not appropriate for them, or they're not interested, right? So you don't arrange the date. You say, not interested. And then when we feel that there's someone that is befitting, we bring it up to our child, to the boy, the guy, the girl, and we ask them, do you think it's fitting? Usually they'll agree, not always. Sometimes they'll say, yeah, no, I'm not interested, even though we thought it was good. Okay. So it means we don't arrange a date. Now it works on both sides. The other side also has to do that, right? And when both sides agree, so then they go out on a date. On that date, what are they looking for? To see if they want to, if they like this person enough to go out again. But with the eye, is this a person I want to marry? Is this a person I want to marry? Not only that I just don't want to be alone, and is this a person who I could see to be together for the rest of my life, is an aspect, an important aspect, because you need to know about the character of that person. Is that character something that's fitting? And that is a person that you want to be with. But that doesn't end there. They're looking for, is this someone who's going to be a good father or a good mother? Is this someone who has the qualities and the values of wanting to build a family? And you're looking for those character qualities at the same time. This is pretty foreign to Western culture today, because Western culture is looking just for the fit for me, because it's about me. Now, yes, there's an important value. You need to look for someone who fits me, right? Get that. But that's not the ultimate about marriage. The ultimate is what you're creating together in Beisoy, in this home. And therefore you're looking at Ishtoi, at what your potential wife will be. Is she going to create this home that I would like to have? So therefore values become really important. They become crucially important. What kind of values? What kind of outlook? What kind of kids do you want your kids to be? So on and so forth. So how do we value marriage? As marriage is something that has two components, about a union of two halves of one soul that need to match. Absolutely. And you try to match as best as you can, as best as you see, when you have that arranged date, that eventually the two will decide if they will want to arrange a marriage together. Right? But what will be seen is not just, is this really the other half of my soul? But in that other half of my soul, is this someone who I'm going to build together a beautiful home? with not a few kids, but lots of kids, hopefully. So how do you look at the woman, at Ishtai, with respect for who they are, appreciation for who they are, ultimately coming to love them because of the respect and the love is in marriage that Rambam spoke about. But at the same time, seeing how together we'll be able to transcend to create this beautiful home amongst the Jewish people, an everlasting edifice amongst the Jewish people. Is that clear? Yeah? Beautiful. So now we can understand how the representative of God, on behalf of me and you, the Jewish people, on the holiest day of the year, in the holiest place, who is the ultimate servant of God, that this person needs to be whole and complete. Because he's bringing on the holiest day and the holiest place completion for me and you, for all of us. So it's not enough that he just be married, but he needs to be married in the full sense of what marriage is, in its complete sense. Not just, not being alone and having someone in his life to complete him, but marriage is something about that transcends my human needs, even though you can say human needs also include having children, right, in a sense, but it's something that transcends the individual. And as I mentioned, unfortunately today, people are not sensing transcendence. They're not sensing they want just to have their own enjoyment of life. And therefore they see little ones that, yeah, you got to wake up in the middle of the night. Yeah, little ones that you've got to tend with. And when they get bigger, they become bigger problems. As in Yiddish, we say kleine Kinder, kleine Tzaras. Small kids, small problems. Größere Kinder, big kids, big problems, right? But ultimately, the Kohen Gadol needs to be a complete person. Complete not only that he's married, but he's married with the sensibility of what marriage is, which the concept and the devotion that marriage is Beisai. So if the Torah only told us the word Ishtai, then we say a wife, right? But because the Torah says Beisai, his home, and that's defined as Ishtai, his wife, so it's not just married, it doesn't, rather, the halacha doesn't mean he has to have children, but he's married in the full concept that it's not just about, him not being alone, but it's about him in the full sense of marrying someone who is going to be there together with him to create an everlasting edifice amongst the Jewish people. That's a complete person. And it's interesting to note with this idea, interesting that the Talmud tells us a phenomenal thing. Anyone who does not have a house is not a person. Ooh, you don't have a house, you're not a person? What does that mean? So on the simplest of level, it's speaking about, having a home, a roof over your head. And if you don't have that, you're like a nomad, right? You're homeless, means you don't have an address, you don't have permanence. That's on a simple level. But here we can tie the two things together. Anyone who doesn't have a house, anyone who doesn't have a wife who is your house, who is your home, who is creating and nurturing something that's just beyond, not just beyond, the respect and love that you have between each other, but how you're creating something greater than that, then you're not complete. You're not whole. That's what it's saying. You're not whole if you don't have a home. So now we can understand how the wife is his home. On the holiest day, in the holiest place, it necessitates, in order to bring atonement, not just for himself, starting with yourself, and then for your wife, who is the mainstay of your home, who is the one who's together with you, but is the mainstay of that responsibility of creating this, is in fact, through that, gives me the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, the capability of representing the entire Jewish people. Because he's complete personally, he's complete relationships with his wife and home, in a sense of home, and therefore is capable of representing the entire Jewish people on behalf of God and bringing atonement. Other times of the year, it doesn't have to be so complete. It's not so necessary. But on this day, in fact, it is. This is what the Rebbe says. Now we can appreciate what's so great about the fact that the high priest on Yom Kippur must be married. And moreover, one who understands that marriage is about building a home, this quality, in fact, makes him personally a more complete person. As the rabbi said, anyone who doesn't have a house is not a person. By having a house, one attains the true quality of a person. So here is, again, sharing the two ideas, house, wife, right? Creating that house is the completion. Now, again, just to put this in proper perspective, this is on Yom Kippur. The rest of the year, he doesn't have to even be married. And marriage has a value in the relationship itself of respect and love, as the Rambam teaches us, right? However, having this is, as just as Yom Kippur epitomizes, the holiest. So here is also the concept of what is holy. And the ultimate is having children, the greatest blessing that God can grant a husband and wife, that I think we can all appreciate. And I'm quoting now from the Rebbe. The greatest possible nachas, pride, and joy a parent can have is to have children and witness them growing up and following the path of Torah and mitzvahs and being good people. Now, the Rebbe made that statement. He and his wife didn't have children. And the Rebbe, I don't recall exactly what Yechidus it was and how it came out. I don't remember the context. But the Rebbe said to someone in private audience in Yechidus that there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not pained by the fact of not having a child. Obviously, it was meant to be. This is what God had chosen for the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin. And
Didn't he say that everybody was his child? All
no,
the Jews were all his
that's a
children?
different. First of all, that's a different story. Thank you for sharing that, Leah. That's a different story of the Rebbitzin of a friend of mine who was, when he was a child playing or coming to visit, rather, the Rebbitzin in her home with his parents. So he asked where, he wanted to play with some kids. And he didn't see any kids. So he asked the Rebbitzin, where's your kids? I want to play with somebody. So she smiled. The parents were horrified by that question. How inappropriate, but a child's a child, a 4-year-old or whatever. And the Rebbitzin with her dignified way, smiled and said, my children are in 770, the students in yeshiva, right? Yes, so that's true, that story. But there's a different story. The Rebbe felt the pain of not having his own. So why am I saying that? Is because some of you maybe don't have children. Maybe not even married. So the mitzvah is to try to get married and to try to have children. You can't, shotgun marriages don't work. We don't do that, right? Arranged marriages, if you want to give me the permission, I'll try to do that for you, but I don't think you go for that. Maybe an arranged date. And if you need that, then contact me. I will help. So you need to make the effort. And you need to make the effort to be married and within marriage to have a child. That is something that is, obligation that we have is to make that effort. In the end, we can't control that. And therefore, we shouldn't feel that, yes, okay, you won't be able to be the high priest if you're a man and not married. That's true. All right, but there are different positions, and there's only one high priest, only one Kohen Gadol. That's okay. That doesn't mean you don't have value and you don't have purpose. As the Rambam said, in the relationship, you need respect first, then love. Likewise with every human relationship. And actually, as we learned at the beginning of the class, if you recall, Adam was created one and singular. And I mentioned, God said it wasn't good, that he's alone. But the Medrash, or actually the Talmud tells us, why was Adam created singular when every other creature that God created in the 6 days of creation were created in multitudes? This is to teach us that the world was created for one person. That it's fitting that God would create the entire universe and everything within the universe just for me. Not for me being married. Not for me being, married with a family. For me, myself, and I, period. Not as a married person, just as a person created in the image of God. God would have created the world just for that one person as he did for Adam. That's the message. And therefore, we have such great intrinsic value that my next action, my next word, my next thought could tilt the scales and bring salvation, redemption, and bring Mashiach. And bring Mashiach. Exactly. Not because I'm married, not because I have a family, because I'm me. Yeah, because I am me. In other words, because a person isn't married, because a person doesn't have a family, doesn't take away the fact that the whole world is waiting for your next action that could tilt the scales. God is waiting for your next action, your next words, your next thought that can tilt the scale and bring redemption and salvation and Mashiach to this world. Again, not because you're married, not because you have a family, because you're you, period. Adam wasn't married when he first was created by God. So we have to make sure that we don't forget that notion. That being said, we have intrinsic value, but to bring to the greater state of accomplishing, we have to, through marriage, brings us to truly serve God, because I can't think only about myself. Not married, you don't have anybody that you're responsible for or to think of but yourself. You're not forced, and it's very easy to look, and it's much harder than to be selfless. In marriage, it's forced upon you. And that's actually the term Ezer Kenegdai, a helpmate against you. Against you meaning you shouldn't feel that you are you. And you're you with your ego. And she's going to bring down your ego. And that's a different discussion for another time. Bottom line is that we have a paradox over here of like a balance between these two different truths that are paradoxical, but are very real and very important. But the message here about the Kohen Gadol on the holiest day of the year, the holiest place, and the holiest person needs to be complete. So we need to try to complete ourselves by marriage, through marriage, creating a family. We have that duty to try that. And again, if we, for whatever reason, God has other plans, which he has, but if we have that is our notion, and that is what we know we should do, and we make that effort, that's what's important. And again, not to forget how valuable, sometimes it can be very, between us, we have a son, needs to get married, wants to get married. It can be frustrating. It can be frustrating. And many of you might be experiencing that. But that frustration, we have to be careful, because when we balance that with the fact that my intrinsic value of being created in the image, and not just the image of God, but as a Jewish soul, we have a part of God in us. We have to remember how invaluable we are to the eternal plan that God has for all of creation and for me within creation. And therefore, what I do matters. What I say and think all matters. And with that, just a reminder that it matters so much that it could change the world for good and bring Mashiach. 2 weeks tomorrow, Wednesday night, we're going to be starting our Mashiach course, which is, of course, a course that you're all going to come to, because it is the ultimate in everything. It's the ultimate course of all courses. I'm so excited to be teaching it and sharing it with you, to growing myself with it, because I need it for myself in order to live the life I need to live in completion. We all need to be complete. And this new course will help us in that completion. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Powerful. Beautiful stuff.
So is it that we have to look at the whole Yom Kippur service as in relation to marriage? Is that what you're ultimately saying?
No, it's the high priest, we said, is got to be the one who has to be married.
Mhm.
No,
Okay.
he has to be complete in order that he can be complete for us.
Okay.
Not only married, but the notion of marriage. That the notion of marriage is that his wife is not just there for him, but something that transcends them in creating family, right? It doesn't mean he has to have family, but that notion, right? That means he has to be a complete person on the complete day in a complete place to bring completion to us, which means atonement.
So obviously the wife has to play an extremely important part in that relationship, in the marriage. It's not merely that he is married, but that his wife is also contributing
Oh, of course.
to the
Yeah.
to the Shalom Bait.
Yep. Yes. Very good. Absolutely. All right. No questions, no
Yeah.
comments. You got all the clarity. Amazing.
Food for thought.
Whoever didn't get a chance yet, you can go to my JLI Montreal JLI, Jewish Learning Institute, jlimontreal.com. You can sign up for the course. We're looking forward to something amazing. All right. Tomorrow
Thank you.
morning,
Thank
9:30
you.
for Tanya. Thank you, Uva. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to mention. I'm terrible. This class is being sponsored actually by my Mechutin's daughter, Shayna. Her father passed away just over a year ago, and it's being sponsored in honor of Shmarya ben Yitzchak Katzen. May his neshama go from strength to strength, and in the merit of this, that he was a real chassid, a complete Jew. May the merit of this, that his neshama should go from strength to strength, and he should be a good to better for his family, and bring only good things for all of Klal Yisrael, and ultimately bring the final redemption of Mashiach now. And remember him with great fondness and great love.
Man.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All the best, folks. Be well.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good evening.
God bless.